Hey there, Erin here. Welcome back to Style Sew Me. I'm going to show you how to self-draft a hood to add to any top or dress that you would like. I added a hood to this dress that I just made, and I self-drafted the entire thing starting from my body block. And so I simply made the adjustments to that block to create the dress, and then I self-drafted a hood to add onto it. So let's dive into the supplies. You're going to need some tracing paper. I have some medical tracing paper from Amazon, about a half yard of fabric, a pencil, pen, or marker. I'm going to use a marker so that you can see it very clearly on camera. You're going to need some fabric scissors, flexible measuring tape, a hip curve ruler if you have one. If not, no big deal, but you will need a straight edge ruler. So if you find that you are short on a couple of supplies, I have added a link to Style Sew Me that shows you all of my favorite tools that you see in my videos. You'll also need the top or dress that you plan on adding the hood to. So first things first, grab the pattern pieces that you're going to be working with because we are going to measure the neckline. So this is my back piece and this is my front piece of my knit block that I made. It's not pretty, but this is just the draft that I worked from and traced from. And you're going to first have to draw the stitching line around your neckline. So this is the line that is actually going to be where you sew, taking into account your seam allowance. And so this is my back neckline right here, and this is my front neckline. And both of these pieces are cut on the fold. So you're going to take your flexible tape measure, and after you trace those lines, you're going to walk your tape measure around that line, stopping at the intersection between the stitching line for your shoulder and the stitching line for your neck. And you're going to record that measurement. You're going to do the same thing for your back. You're going to take that tape measure and you're going to walk that tape measure to the intersection between the neckline and the shoulder line, which is right here. And you're going to record that measurement. So working on the front bodice piece, we need to take the distance from this inner shoulder point here, but at the center front. So we're going to come straight across, and then we need to measure the distance between here and your center front stitching line. So again, I'm going to show you one more time. So trace your finger, place your finger at your inner shoulder point. And if you need to, see, I have a grid here on my cutting table. So I'm just going to follow this line across, and I need to measure from here down to my stitching line. So I'm going to take my ruler. Oops. And I'm placing the top edge of my ruler right across from this inner shoulder point here. And I'm measuring down from this point to my center front stitching line. And go ahead and record that measurement as your center front drop. We need to take a measurement on the body, and you'll need to measure from the top of your shoulder at the base of your neck all the way to the center, the top center of your head. And so you want to make sure that your tape measure is across your ear. So it's at the base of your neck, goes across your ear, and lands at the center top of your head. And I am just placing mine ever so gently on top of my hair because when I put my hood on, I don't want it to smush my hair. You know what I mean? I don't want it to be restrictive. So if you have big hair or you wear, you know, big hairstyles or voluminous hairstyles, then just rest the tape measure gently on top of your hair and record that measurement right there at the center. And we're going to record that as your head height measurement. So now that you've got those measurements, let's go ahead and start drafting. So I've got your paper laid out. I've got my measurements written down right here so I can see them. And you're just going to draw a line across maybe the bottom third of your paper. And then you're going to draw another one going up through the center. And you're gonna just bring it all the way up. So I'm drafting mine upside down, but the way that you see it on the screen is the right side. So I'm upside down just so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, where those two lines intersect are going to be your point A. And then moving to the right of your point A is going to be your point B, and that is going to be the back stitching line for the back neckline. You're going to measure over. Make that point, and that's going to be your B. Your C is going to go directly down from A. Raise my paper so you can see. Your C is going to be your center front drop measurement. So go from A down and plot your point C. And then at point C, you're going to draw a line that is parallel to the first line. Okay. To plot point D, we're going to measure from A diagonally, and that distance should meet at the line where C is plotted. And so that is going to be your front neckline. And so I'm going to move my ruler, and so I have to extend my line a little bit. You may have to as well, because the distance between A and D, D needs to sit on the line for line C. Right there. All right. Now for the head height, we've got A right here. And we're going to measure up +1 the head height. So measure up your head height and add 1. And make that plot, and that's going to be your E. I'm going to use a yardstick because my head is so big that I need a longer ruler. Oh, goodness. So this is where my E is going to be. All right, so now all we need to do is connect those lines. And so let's start off with connecting A to D. And A to B is already connected. So B to E is not necessarily going to be a direct connection. So what I'm going to have you do is just draw a line perpendicular through E up at the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect B straight up to line E, but not through point E. We're just taking B up to the line where point E is plotted. You can also do a gentle curve to connect those 2 points if you would like. I like to do that. Just gives you that kind of scooped out effect. And I'll just hand draw that in up to that line. And then the top is already created for you, and you're going to extend that down to line D, and you can use a ruler to point D, and you can use a ruler to connect those two. Oops. And that's it. So again, you're connecting line A to D. A to B is already connected for you. Then you're going to connect B to the line that goes through E, and you're going to curve that line out. I'm going to draw a line directly across E. This is going to be your top of your hood. And then these 2 lines across E should meet with line D. This is the front of your hood. This is where your face goes. This is your neckline. This is the center back of your hood, and this is the top of your hood. Now we are going to add our seam allowance. And so I'm going to use a different color marker so you can see what I'm doing. For the front of your hood, you're going to add 1 inch of seam allowance because this is going to be your casing. Okay, and I'm using orange to add my seam allowance, which will end up being my pattern cutting line. For the rest of your hood, around these lines, you're going to add the seam allowance that is consistent with the pattern that you're using. My block, I always draft my blocks and my Style Sew Me patterns with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So that is what I'm going to add. 1/2 inch seam allowance along the top, this center back curve, and down the neckline. But if you are working with a commercial pattern that has 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, then you're going to want to use 5/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to add my 1/2 inch. You add what you were supposed to add across the top. And then I'm going to kind of eyeball this. I'm so used to working with 1/2 inch seam allowance that I can pretty much eyeball it and see. Okay, so that final line is going to be the line that you're going to cut out your pattern piece. And go ahead and label it hood cut 2. Okay, there we go. You want? I'm writing upside down for you guys. Okay. Also, after you label your hood, we're going to add a grain line. Since you already have a line that goes directly up the middle of your pattern, just go ahead and add your little directional arrows, and that will be your grain line because you're going to cut 2. So now go ahead and cut out your pattern piece and then cut out 2 of your hood pieces of your fabric. And then I'm going to show you how to sew it together. Okay, I've got my hood cut out and I've got my 2 pieces right sides facing. And the first stitch we're going to sew is across the top and down the center back. You're going to sew using the seam allowance that you added. Again, I added 1/2 inch, and so that's what I'm going to use. If you added 5/8 of an inch, then you use that. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just going to use a basting stitch on my machine, and I'm using, like I said, I'm using a yellow thread so you can see very clearly what I'm doing. And so I'm going to go ahead and sew in that stitch. Okay, when I get towards the edge, I'm going to stop about 1/2 inch away from the edge or whatever your seam allowance is. Raise that presser foot, leave your needle in, turn the fabric, and continue sewing. If you have a serger, go ahead and finish those raw edges and make them look nice and neat, because this will be seen when you're wearing your garment. You will be able to see the inside of this hood. So go ahead and press your seams and make it as neat as you possibly can. So I got my hood facing wrong sides up, and along this curved edge, which will be the edge that lays on top of your head, we are going to press 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Press 1/4 of an inch. And then you're going to fold 3/4 of an inch from there and press that down. And so when you're finished pressing, you're going to have a nice clean folded edge just like this. So go ahead and do that at your ironing board. Okay, so I'm going to press pause for a second. If you want to put in a string into your hood, now is the time for you to put in your buttonhole. So after you've pressed your 1/4 of an inch, and then you fold it over and pressed your 3/4 of an inch, this excess here will be snipped off, okay? So you'll want your buttonhole to be up here somewhere. So right above this area. So think about it like this. This is going to be snipped off, and then you need to have your seam allowance that you've accounted for here, because this is the part that's going to attach to your neckline. So above this is the real estate where you want to put your buttonhole, and you want to do this before you sew it down like this. So this is how I would do that. So I'm gonna say, all right, this is gonna be cut off, right? And I need this much more for seam allowance, right? So my buttonhole needs to be about right here. Got it? And so when you fold it over, your buttonhole, you'll sew your buttonhole right here. So you'll make sure that your marking is clear, and then you'll sew your buttonhole. And you do that on both sides of your hood. I'm not doing a buttonhole because I'm not using a string in this hood, and I didn't use one in the dress that I made, but that is where you would mark your holes for your strings. And so now we're gonna go and sew the casing. So again, put your buttonhole first if you're gonna use it, and then go through and follow along with us for the next step. So I'm gonna start stitching about 1/8 of an inch from the inner edge of that folded fabric. So take your scissors and we're gonna chop off the excess here. And these threads. Okay, so we've got the casing done. Your buttonholes are done if you chose to add that. If you would like, you can go ahead and thread your string through here. And whatever string you chose to use, if you're using a shoestring, whatever you want. And now I'm going to show you how to attach your hood to your top. So go ahead and grab your shirt or dress or whatever you plan to attach your hood to. And right sides together, we're going to start at the center back, and we're going to place that center back seam of our hood at the center back of our shirt. Go ahead and pin. And then we're just going to bring it around. And then once you've pinned it, you're simply just going to go ahead and sew that seam. And also, I forgot to mention, you're going to have some overlap with your hood in the front. You want that, okay? It creates less stress on your hood when it's hanging from the neckline. And again, go ahead and finish the raw edges on the inside if you would like. But other than that, you're done. See? You're done. So here is your finished shirt. And this is why I said you're going to have some overlap here. It puts less stress because you've got this fabric hanging. And see, you can see those raw edges in there when you're wearing it. So you want to make sure to finish that off neatly with a serger or an overlock stitch. Doesn't matter if your fabric frays or not. You can also add some really pretty binding right here to cover that up. That'll be a really nice accent as well. Same thing goes in the back. So you've got that nice hang right there with the hood, and all of these seams on the inside, most of them will be seen when wearing. So again, if you want to add a beautiful binding to cover this up, if you don't have a serger, if you want to just use a serger with matching or coordinating thread, whatever is up to you, then you'll want to take advantage of really making this a nice, pretty, and clean finish for you. And we've got our nice clean casing right here that looks really nice. And if you chose to add your string, then you would be able to, your strings would be hanging and you would just be able to pull and cinch your hood like you would like.